Welcome to the Hope for Healing Network. This is Cecily Henderson. Thank you so much for joining us in this safe space to get today. I have a lovely lady on. I am just thrilled to introduce her. I've been listening to her story. It's touched my heart, and I'm so excited just
Mm.
for you to hear her story. Barbara, welcome to the Hope for Healing Network.
Thank you, Cecily, and thank you for inviting me to give my story and my testimony of hope.
I just love that you are spreading hope as far as you possibly can and all the different places you visited. And you are just an incredible inspiration. So if you wouldn't mind just starting a little bit from the beginning and tell us your story.
Well, I'm a pastor's daughter, was raised in a wonderful Christian home. I'm a woman of faith, woman of hope, and I speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, for the rights of all the destitute. It says in Proverbs 31:8 and 9, speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and needy. And that's what I'm doing all over the world. Because of what I've gone through, God has given me a testimony out of the testing that I've gone through. And I never would have dreamed that I would be going all over the world and on television in the Philippines. I had a 4-minute um, 700 Club interview with my documentary there, my backstory. My mom and dad loved Jesus, loved me, loved my brother and I. He's 2 years older. And my mother taught me well. My mother prayed for me. My mom and dad are both in heaven now together after 71 years of marriage. So what happened to me was I was stuck in denial with painful secrets. My body was shut down. I was shut down emotionally, psychologically, every which way, and I couldn't function. I went through infertility, which led to adoption and pregnancy of our firstborn. Well, we adopted, and then I got pregnant five months later, and then 7 years later, we had our third son. But undiagnosed postpartum, severe postpartum depression shut me down, and I couldn't care for my 6 and 7 year old with a newborn. I wanted to run away from it all. Why do victims of sexual crimes carry their secrets without disclosing them for a lifetime? Because we have severe PTSD. For me, I've learned that it's frozen uh, fear. No words can understand the suppressed memories and disassociation that you've gone through. And it's like traumatic amnesia. It's like the war victims that go to the war and they come home and then they can't function in their homes. It's the same thing with somebody like myself that went through incest by my grandfather at age 2 to 8. Um, I had a pedophile uncle on my mother's side, clergy sex assault at age 11 and 12 at a Christian youth camp by a clergy that reeled us up to the mission house. He had a room at the top of at the top of the lodge, and reeled us kids up with comic books and candy. And everybody knew him. He was flamboyant, happy-go-lucky, um, and I didn't realize what he was doing to me because nobody explained it to me. I didn't have any awareness or education back then. And at age 16, Cicely, I could not start my monthly cycle. This literally shuts your body completely off. So I had to have hormone shots, and it started my cycle at age 16. And then at age 18, my daddy took a church in Texas. I was bullied by the kids from the South. I moved from the North, and I learned to be a chameleon. I went inside my skin and I started talking Southern because they'd make fun of my words. Oh, say the word COW, and I'd say cow, and they say, no, it's KO. And so they'd make fun of me. So in order to function and be friends with these kids, I started learning Southern language, and yet I lived a lie. At age 18, I fell in love with my college boyfriend who I married, and I said no when he wanted to have sex. I wanted to remain pure. and I wanted to remain a virgin. So we got married shy of my 21st birthday. And that's when domestic sexual violence, 9 years into our marriage, my husband's dad's tragic death by suicide led to pornography and adultery and the death of our marriage. Now, if men are listening, or women that have been married to men that are into these kind of things, porn or any of that, God sees it all. You cannot hide from God. And you might think, you're doing it in the dark and you're hiding from your spouse, but it's sin, and it's our marriage was dead at that point. So I was betrayed and violated my boundaries. Incest is the worst form of abuse. You literally stay silent until you um, bring it out in the dark, from the dark. For 38 years, I had all this inside of me, and I couldn't tell nobody, couldn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my parents, nobody, until my mother was in her 90s. And I started working and speaking in prison conferences and domestic violence conferences, and going all over the world. And finally, she said, when I wrote my book, she said, yes, you can put it in your book. So I want to show you picture of my book. Can you see that picture?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay.
Listen to the cry of the child.
God woke me up 3 nights in a row from a deep sleep. I knew I was going to write a book, and I knew it was going to be called Listen to the Cry of the Child, because when I came out of the room after facing a sex offender, which I did in 1998, the evil was exposed. I had an image of myself, and that's me with a little girl with a baby carriage, toy airplane, crack pot tossed like a rag doll. I couldn't understand why my life was in garbage. There was a garbage heap on the bottom of the trash. But in God's still small voice, he said, my child, there's still life in that clay pot. Someone tossed out and no one wanted. Your life's been broken and poured out as an offering with a passion and purpose to give hope to others just like you. There's a seed in that pot growing with a beautiful rose, which is blooming and blossoming. So my life was once dead. It's now born again. And that rose, which was fragile and fragrant, is now blossoming and blooming all over the world. And I've become a voice for many that can't tell. I'm an overcomer, Cicely. God healed me by my faith. I touched Jesus' garment. I was that woman that touched the hem of his garment. And the woman, Jesus turned around and said, who touched me? The life was drawn out of Jesus, and she was healed. His disciples rebuked him, and she was shaking and fearful and saw Jesus. And he said, you are a woman of faith. You are becoming whole. You have become whole. So what has helped me in my healing is my recovery, New International Version of the Recovery Devotional Bible. Most clergy have never seen this before, but it's a 12-step recovery devotional Bible by Zondervan. And it's that was given to me by a heroin drug dealer that we took in. My
Wow.
addiction was codependency with drug addicts because I wasn't whole. And it's a very dangerous thing to do, is to take in addicts. But I've had pimps in my home. I've had heroin addicts, prostitutes, gang members, Boston gang member, that one of our motorcyclists, we members of Christian Motorcycle Association, one of our motorcyclist friends saw this gang member at an AA meeting, and he said, you've got to meet Barb. So I called him, and he had just gotten out of prison, and we brought him to a church that we attended, and he became a Christian, and we helped him. We've helped so many people, and it's just so good that God's given me such a smile on my face now that I am whole, healed by the Holy Spirit.
Wow, Barbara. Oh my goodness, your story. I mean, my heart sank when you were telling me before the interview, just everything that you've gone through and
Mm,
how you are enduring, and just you're not letting it. And I know that there's lots of trauma involved,
Oh
but
yeah.
you are still helping people despite the trauma and the terrible things that you have endured. You are moving forward, you are taking action and loving and helping others, and that is truly incredible, to be able to do that after such traumatizing events that happened as a child.
Yes, amen. And um triggers, I want to mention about triggers. Triggers can be very intense, very crippling. You might see somebody in the grocery store that reminds you of your pedophile, or reminds you of your dad that raped you, or it can be a glance, a smell, a rejection, or ignites a fuse that goes into your emotional wounds. So even with therapy or reading self-help books or journaling, a trigger goes off and the person in front of us turns into that person that abandoned us or abused us, or the partner that cheated. So suddenly through the lens of the camera becomes like a movie projector. And I had that happen in the grocery store the other day. I went to get ice cream cones and I saw pineapple syrup and that you put on the ice cream. And my grandfather brought me in the car, unzipped himself, did things to me and him, and I screamed trying to jump out of the car. And he was always out of ice cream. So I'm sure they ate it up and he took me and he put the pineapple syrup on it. So that brought a trigger back to my mind that day. I also want to tell you how I exposed the pedophile clergy. In 1998, I went back to the campground and I saw a best friend that I hadn't seen in 27 years. And she had just gotten out of a rehab. She was a pastor's wife, had a lot of addictions. And it was an evening service when she poked me on the back and she was weeping. She said, "Barb, go to the altar with me." And I did. As she was heaving, weeping and crying, I knew that something traumatic had happened to her. And God, in his discernment, told me that it was the same pastor that molested me. And so, with the emptiness and the addictions and sorrow in her life, she wrote me a letter. She went back to her home and she wrote me a letter, and she told her pastor's wife, and she said, Barb needs to send me. Oh, well, she asked her, "Do you know anybody that's been abused?" And she said, "Yes, I just talked to her at the camp." So she said she needs to write me a letter and tell me who did it, and I'll expose it with the denomination. So letters were sent out to a lot of different people. They set up a committee of discipline for him and a committee of restoration for me and four others. Now there were four of us that he had violated. And he was in complete denial. And 1 year earlier, in 1997, in the Mama Alliance Academy in Gabon, Africa, South Africa, in 1997, the boarding school there had missionary kids that were separated for the sake of the gospel. MAF used to fly these little children to this boarding school where they thought they were safe. They were far from safe. They were in a remote jungle. They had no phones, no communication. And as adults, they came forward with all kinds of abuse and sex abuse, dental abuse, where they tied the kids' hands behind their back and pull their teeth. Horrible things happened to these kids. So as adults, they were very messed up and afraid and didn't go to church anymore. Some became lesbians and
So,
gays.
so how did they okay, so going through all these terrible experiences, and I'm sure that there are people that can relate,
Right.
how did they overcome these horrific things? What did they do
Well, they
to
set up a
help?
committee. They wanted to have prevention. Uh, and so they set up an independent council investigation on these kids in Africa. Um, so they set up a committee and they said, what's it going to cost to these kids, the adult kids who need therapy? Will we have lawsuits? Will we be embarrassed? And they said, no, we need to do the right thing. So they had a healing, forgiveness, and restoration retreat for these adult kids. Most of them don't go to church anymore. Most of them are angry with God. I never got angry at God. I got angry at the people that abused me, and I had to work through all that in my mind and in my spirit. You can't go back and change your beginning, but you can start all over and change the ending, C.S. Lewis says. But sex offenders who target children often have been targeted themselves and violated. Some come from abusive alcoholic homes. Some have deep insecurities and rage because of what they've been through. Their boundaries have been crossed to meet their own perverted needs. There's a void in their soul. So what we need to do is have accountability. My husband had accountability to talk about what he went through, and he still does with me. And in scripture in Exodus 34:7, it says, he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children for the sins of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. So I healed as a result of this recovery devotional Bible, writing my book, and grieving my losses. If you don't grieve your losses, you end up being stuck.
Yeah,
Sexual abuse
that's
assault is a death-like experience. It's like the dark night of a soul. No one can fully comprehend or understand except one who's been through it. Grief wears many disguises, and it doesn't always come as death knocking at your door. Sometimes it's unexpected, sometimes it's expected. But unless you grieve all your losses, every single one of them, you'll end up being lost and locked up forever.
wow. That's really profound and it's absolutely true. If you don't work through it and don't grieve and go through that grieving process,
Right.
it's really difficult to heal. And
Yes.
yeah, and so that's, yeah, very profound advice for people. Now, if people are still struggling with these things that they're keeping inside of them, what do you have available for people to go to now? I know we have your book. Is there a
Mhm.
website? Do you have
Yes.
events? What do you offer, Barbara?
My book is Listen to the Cry of the Child. They can get a personally signed copy from me, of course, but my website is www.listentothecry.org. My phone number is 508-473-1280. And they could call me. I have been working with a woman now that's going through my support group, Beauty Out of Ashes. I went through it 7 times myself and brought others in to it as I healed. Each year you get more healing as you go through the support with others. Support is absolutely necessary in order to heal. Many people don't have support. They lose their
No.
best friend who turn their back on them. Uh, they have to separate from the unhealthy people that have abused them and shame them. Shame says, I did something wrong. Blame says something's wrong with me. Shame says I did a bad thing. Blame says I am the bad person. Shame is toxic. Look at what happened with Adam and Eve in the garden. They hid from God. They covered up and they were scared. And so are we that have been through the trauma of abuse, any kind of abuse. So shame is toxic and it should not be in our life. We need restoration, healing, and deliverance. And I have had so many people contact me for shows like you're doing. I've been on Dr. Oz show with survivors of sexual assault and harassment. And I'm just delighted to be on your show and give light to those that are still in the dark.
Oh, Barbara, thank you so much. It's an honor to have you here. And,
They can
my
email me as well. I'm sorry to
No,
interrupt you.
that's okay. It's okay. We'll put all of that information
Okay.
in the comments. So if people want to contact you that need that support, then
Yes.
we'll make sure that that's available to them. And I thank you for what you're doing and for
Can
your
I
love
show my
and
chart? Can I
of
show you
course, yes, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Tell me if you can see it.
Yes. Yep, we can see it.
Okay. In my support group that I teach, well, I got an award for this in San Diego, California. I've been to a trauma conference there and I won the award. And it says on the top, survivors of domestic violence and sexual trauma often become enablers because of post-traumatic stress disorder. My personal vulnerable journey resulted in choices I made, but helped me understand the whys of my experiences, including questioning the very core of my existence with her codependency addiction involving a male heroin addict. This insane behavior sets us up for shame and become very destroyed human beings who have no idea who we are. And it sets the stage of a play we do not want to be acting in. So, who am I? Those are all the words that I used to think of myself: shame, blame, enable, silent, scream, broken, shattered, guilt, chains, no identity. You have to have an identity. You have to have hope. And so I thought of myself as an outcast. I was lost, wounded, hopeless, walking wounded. But in the class that I teach, I hand out a blank mask like this one with holes as eye holes. And I ask the women that I teach to tell who they think I am or who they think this other person is in the group. For me, they put, you're a butterfly, you have wings, you're light, you're gentle, you're released, you're happy, you're caring, strong, woman of faith, organized. Joy, my middle name is Joy. And you're a godson, you're a disciple, you're pardon, your freedom. God pardoned us from all the things we've been through. So why should we hold it on our backs? But we do, until we're healed, until we come to grips with that, what happened to us, and grieve the losses and have hope.
Oh, Barbara, thank you so much for bringing your light today and for what you're doing. You know, I'm so honored that you're here. And if anybody who's watching, we just want to let you know that you are loved. You're not alone. Please reach out to Barbara if you have had any of these terrible traumas in your life, and you know, or me. We're definitely here for you. So thank you so much for joining us. And Barbara, thank you again.
Thank you, Cicely.
All right, everyone, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.